Student housing is such a unique industry. The more unique an industry is, the more important it is for that industry to have a resource and a platform to share ideas and data, to determine best practices, and a platform to simply promote networking among the professionals in that industry. That's what we are setting out to provide with Student Housing Insight. But what's even more unique about the student housing industry is how unique those professionals are. They want to make a positive impact on the students and the university communities they serve. They understand they have an opportunity to touch the future. They come to work every day looking for ways to make that future bright. If you're one of those people, come be a part of Student Housing Insight. Guys, welcome to Shop Talk for May 2023. I'll go through this one more time. Again, if you haven't been on Shop Talk before, this is our monthly industry webinar. And we do this each month to kind of bring the industry together and talk about things that are obviously relative to our industry, and to get all the operators and owners and developers out there on the same page on a couple of initiatives and things that we're trying to work throughout the year. So this is a perfect opportunity for anyone from the site level to the C-suite to join in each month. And we typically do it around the second week, either the second Tuesday or Thursday of each month. While Dave's getting ready on a couple of things, I'll go ahead and navigate through this one more time. We've got the chat in the right-hand side of your screen. This is something that we really encourage everybody to use, mainly to tell me that my mic's on mute. But also, if there's anything that you want to, anybody you want to say hey to that's on the panel, or you've got questions for the audience, that's a great place to put it. Also, if you've got a question for our panels, just ask that you do it in the Q&A. That way I can find it there. It's a little bit easier than in the chat. And then also, we've got the ability for you to come onto the virtual stage if you want to ask any of the panelists questions. You just hit that request to speak button, and then you'll go through a couple of audio video checks, and you'll be set. Well, Dave, sorry about that extended intro, but with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to you. Everybody, this is Dave Borsos with the National Multi-Housing Council.
Thanks, Wes. Always happy to participate in this, and you always have a great number of follow-up speakers as well. And one of the mental health for students is something that's certainly incredibly important. So looking forward to listening on that. Some of these, if you listened last month, were there as well. And unfortunately, while some of you may not care that much about some of the things going on in Washington, D.C. Debt ceiling, there's certainly a showdown here in Washington, D.C. The last time it's went this far and maybe even a little bit farther, it's a pretty big disruption in the financial market. So it is something for you all to pay attention to, especially from a finance perspective, given how challenging the environment is today anyway. But it's certainly something that has got a lot of people's attention. Do I think it gets resolved? The answer is yes. The question becomes, from a Democrat side, they're simply saying we're not willing to do anything the Republicans want to do, and the Republicans are unwilling to do anything the Democrats. So somewhere along the way, there may be an 11th hour thing that rescues this, but it is critically important. Things will start to shut down. Borrowing costs will shoot through the roof. There's all kinds of really negative impacts to the degree that they don't get this done. So speaking of financial impacts, this seems to keep dragging on. I don't think it's going to change all that much. The banking sector certainly has a challenge. And for our industry, that certainly is incredibly important, because obviously they're a provider of financing, whether it's construction loans or simply longer-term loans or other type of financing needs. The larger banks are in relatively good shape. Clearly, the kind of smaller and regional banks are feeling some of that pressure. We just had somebody come and speak at our spring board meeting this week. And, the outlook for this year from a banking perspective is not all that great. Those regional banks provide about 75% of commercial real estate debt out there. And so there is some stress in that, and clearly not necessarily in student housing, but in office space. And that has a negative impact for all lending in commercial real estate. So another thing, you're probably going to hear me talking about this in the coming months anyway. So, something that we continue to monitor and have a kind of a little bit of a dismal outlook right now in terms of what's going on in that sector. So hopefully we can look forward to next year and the Fed being done temporarily, at least with raising the rates, will at least provide some stability from a interest rate outlook. But stay tuned on that one. Couple things that we've talked about in the past. If you are a member of NMHC, you would have heard a call to action that occurred just last week regarding the FTC and the CFPB as part of the White House housing strategy, asking for input on experience of residents from background screening, et cetera. And so, they're going to hear a lot from residents and tenants, and it may not come necessarily that much from the student housing sector, but it's something that you all should think about replying to as well. And along the same lines, there's this resident bill of rights, and there's been a lot of pressure for the enterprises to incorporate certain types of residents bill of rights as extreme as rent control, which would impact this sector, even though you don't necessarily think about it, but it would impact this sector. And so you'll see a call to action coming from NMHC when they issue a request for information. We've been dealing a lot with FHFA and met with them recently, but these things would impact how you structure leases if you have a Freddie Mac or a Fannie Mae multifamily student housing loan. So these are things that we're paying attention to. And again, we'll keep everybody informed if you are NMHC members, and if you're not, strongly encourage you to join. One other thing, Energy Star, which has been around for a number of years, when they did this initially about 10 years ago, the portfolio of multifamily properties that were included in the original Energy Star determination was pretty small, and they are in the process of updating that. We worked with Fannie Mae, who's kind of been leading the effort for the EPA and in the Department of Energy in doing this, but we strongly encourage participation by everybody. The more that we can get in there, the more representatives of the entire industry. So let's make sure that the student housing sector is incorporated into the Energy Star update. So it's something that's extremely important. And then the last thing on there, this is something we sent out to a lot of owners. We do this income and expense survey every other year. This year, again, we set a record in terms of the number of participants who took part in that survey. That will come out, and you'll see that in our fall conference and the results from that. But again, that we're pretty thrilled with the number of participants that submitted information for our income and expense survey. So look for that in the coming months. And then one last thing on speaking the coming months, never too early to start thinking about it. We are going to be in Las Vegas for our student housing conference in the fall in October. And the next time that we meet in Shop Talk next month, registration will have just opened that week for that conference. So keep that in mind. We'd love to see you all out there in Las Vegas. And with that, Wes, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks so much for that, Dave. Looking forward to that survey coming out. And that's always got some fantastic information. But hey, we will talk to you next month. And I appreciate you bringing all that news to us.
All right. Thanks.
Great. Well, guys, while we're getting everybody else for the College House segment on board, I really want to tell you about something that's happening next week that we're doing. if you have never worked in a new development, if you've been on site, maybe even a regional manager or portfolio manager, and you've never been a part of a new development and what that lease up is like, we did a webinar about 2 years ago that we got a lot of great feedback, and we're partnering up with Euphorus VR to bring that to you guys again this year. So it is next Thursday, May 18th at 1 p.m. I will put out a link here in just a second as we get everybody on board, and you can click into that and register if you haven't registered already. Well, guys, thanks so much for sitting through my mute session earlier.
No worries. This is the fun part about doing everything live.
Well, guys, I'm gonna make a couple of changes here so people can actually see the screen behind us here. But really quick, I wanted to let the audience know that, hey, we're going to be going through all the College House, national and regional data that they've collected through the end of April, kind of see how that spring semester ended up. And we've got 3 folks on the phone today, or on the webinar today, that are involved both from the operation side as well as the new development side. And we've got some great things to talk about. But while I'll kind of switch some things around here so everybody can see the screen, TJ, if you will, let's start with you. Just introduce yourself.
Sure. And you cut out Wes. Are you just introduce myself? I'm TJ Chambers. I run a boutique consulting company for the development business across the United States nationally. I am a 20-year industry veteran and was a first internal employee, and have been involved for about 25 years in the industry on the ground up and new development side of things.
Fantastic. Meg, we'll go to you next.
Hey everyone, I'm Megan Williams, Regional Director of Leasing and Marketing with Landmark Properties. I currently support 6 properties in Raleigh and Boone, North Carolina, and will be adding a new development to my portfolio in Atlanta coming in August. In terms of Landmark, we are expecting a pretty big year for new developments this year. We're bringing 11 new developments online this fall, so we will be quite busy that time.
I guess I'll wrap us up. I'm John Barr, Portfolio Director for the Dinnerstein Companies. We are a smaller merchant builder, owner-operator, based in Houston. I currently oversee 6 properties, but help on our 13-property portfolio. We have 1 new development this year in the pipeline, and that's going to be in Columbia, South Carolina. So yeah, excited to be here.
Well, fantastic. Well, let's jump into it. Charlie?
How we doing? Thank you so much. Excited to chat with these lovely people. Before I jump into things, Richie, thanks for the shirt. If you haven't talked with Richie Core, spearheading the coalition there. So I told you I'd wear the shirt. We're here. But yes, so let's recap.
We're just all bummed it's not a white T-shirt, because that's your.
I did see Mark Lifshin have a white one, so I know they exist. So I'm what do you call it? I'm hot on the chase for a white tee. So anyway, let's jump into the data. Let's recap April. So where do we end up at April? So this data again is as of the last, I guess, the 28th, which is that last Friday in April. But again, fundamentally, student housing, I mean, it's the same story I've said the last at least 6 or 7 months. Pre-leasing continues to outperform previous years, or last year, excuse me, and previous years. But we're about 6.2% ahead year over year. National pre-lease at roughly about 75.9%. As you can see in the Northeast, Midwest, and Southeast, seeing a lot of good traction there. Pre-leasing ahead, call it 1.5% in the Northeast, about 2% there in the Midwest, and then almost 6% in the Southeast, which again is the largest subset of beds from a regional perspective we're tracking. Can't see the bottom here of the Southwest side, but pre-leasing, again, is roughly about 78.8% as well. I know that that's a strong outperformance there, even though, there we go. Almost whatever that is, 13%. And again, you're seeing a lot of your Texas markets, Arizona, Oklahoma, et cetera. And then the West, which always is a little bit behind, just with the later start of the school years, and a lot of those marquee markets like Eugene, Oregon, for example. But still, up 5.3% there on pre-leasing, which is, again, the same story we've been talking about for the last 6 months. So
Yeah.
What's interesting here really is, as we look at, specifically in the Southeast, and again, 447,000 beds that we're tracking there. That's running out in front a little bit there, but still, that's a lot of your marquee markets. Your Power Five is heavily concentrated there, which is great to see from as Dave Borzos mentioned, the challenges in the banking sector, right? Strong fundamentals and deals are still getting done, which is great to see.
Well, hey, before I want to get into the Southwest region a little bit with both with TJ and John, but before we do that, so last year, you're showing right now we're 6.2% year over year. Last year in September with the year-end report, I think we ended at 93.7.
Mm-hmm.
What's your prediction? You think we're gonna be above, below?
I think we're definitely going to be above. Whether that's above 96. I don't know. I think somewhere in that, call it 95 plus or minus 25 basis points is a fair assumption there, which again is all-time highs. But again, I guess the trend of, I think we're tracking about a little over 39,000 beds delivering this year, maybe 34,000 next year. Sounds like, based on what Megan said, that a lot of that's from Landmark, but there's still enrollment growth being afoot at a lot of these tier one institutions. So, as long as that continues to happen, I think, we have a good outlook, right? Whether that's 2-3 years, who knows? But, for this upcoming fall, somewhere around that 95.5% is where I would expect. Again, that's out of 207 markets. That's not just the tier ones, tier twos. That's, a lot of your tier 3 and tier 4 markets, which still, based on some of the previous ones, are still showing out performance, just maybe not to the degree that we're seeing at, these larger tier 1 institutions.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's jump into the Southwest a little bit, because they've been blowing the rest of the regions out of the water as far as this lease up is concerned. And John and TJ, this is your area, so tell us what's driving this in the Southwest.
You want me to go first, TJ?
Go ahead, John. I'll let you go first.
Yeah. There's a slide that actually shows the Southwest if you want to go there with the rent growth.
Yeah. So honestly, I think with specifically to Texas, that's where my sights lie. You're just seeing a huge impact from COVID with them. After post-COVID, these universities are starting to, at the big names, so UT and Texas A&M, you're seeing them accept, and their enrollment grows so much and rapidly over these past 2 years. And so there's not enough beds for these kids. And so you're continuously seeing these, these areas and the surrounding universities that kind of stretch amongst them. In San Marcos, I think we're 23% ahead of where we were last year, and we got to 100%. But we were almost 80% going into December, and we haven't changed anything in our strategy. We actually were more aggressive on rates this year. And so I know in San Marcos specifically, because of that growth that they've seen, they actually don't have enough beds for kids on campus. And so they're shipping kids out they're having to live in hotels this year to the university. So it's really, we're kind of feeding off of that growth from both of the major universities. And it's kind of trickled down to these tier 1B universities are seeing that. And we're seeing the same thing at Sterling Heights and at UTSA.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So similar concept with me. I just delivered a new asset in Lubbock, Texas at Texas Tech University, as well as a new asset in Austin at University of Texas. Have another one going vertical right now in College Station. And, all those lease ups have actually been pretty tough lease ups, interestingly enough, on the opposite end of kind of John's comment about how strong the rent performance has been with the existing assets. The new lease ups have actually taken a lot longer to kind of really kind of take hold and catch the velocity we've used to be seeing early on in the market. But to John's comment, year two, with the enrollment growth we're seeing at Texas Tech University, as places like College Station and UT tend to start to max out, you're seeing some of these other universities really see the benefit of the added enrollment. And these campuses cannot hold the freshman classes on campus, and there is a need for the beds to come off. However, we are seeing kids and parents alike really make you prove to them that the lifestyle and the brand that you are promising, right, actually lives up to the expectations. I think if you look at the first kind of 20 years in the industry and you look at the early 2000s into the teens, right, there's a lot of, kind of false promises, and you kind of show up and it is or isn't what it was going to be. Nowadays, there's a lot more importance on the front end from both the students and the parents who are supporting them financially to make sure that you manage those expectations correctly and catch up.
Gotcha. Hey, Charlie, just to update you, I did something a little bit different with the slides.
Oh, okay, cool.
So we wouldn't have to switch back and forth, but I did, for anybody that wants the month-end report, I just pushed it out. You can go to the files section and download it. And, of course, we'll have it on shoptalk.info for anybody to download. And I believe you guys are starting to put that on your website, right?
Well, if you're a client of ours, it hits your inbox the Tuesday after we put them out. So you should have got it. We also post them a lot of different places. But yeah.
Gotcha. So, Megan, I want to talk a little bit about rates with you, because in our preliminary call, we had a really good discussion about it. But nationally, we're seeing 9.5% year over year. I don't know. I mean, I've been in this business for over 25 years. I don't know that I've ever seen that from a national perspective. But kind of interested in what if you're starting to see any kind of pushback. You're in two markets that I know have seen double-digit increases this year. So what's kind of the feedback that you're getting?
Yeah, well, I will echo, rate increases have definitely been off the charts this year. In my region specifically, we're tracking an overall average of 14%. They're all in that southeast region, so that's kind of right on par with what we're seeing on the map for that being a higher area. But with that growth, definitely came a wide range of impact. So in some markets, we just kind of saw normal, higher than normal, but kind of still standard for this year increases. And in those markets, it was kind of accepted that everyone was on the same page and doing the same increases. So we didn't see much kickback there. But in some of the markets like Boone and Auburn, were the markets that I was in specifically, we were in a position where we were pushing rates sometimes multiple times a week. And the pushback that we received really came from people kind of feeling that they were rushed and didn't have time to really sit on that decision and capture the rate before they increased. And so we did get to a point with Boone specifically that we pushed rates so high and the rest of the market leased up, and we just kind of stalled with leasing and ended up having to roll back rates a little bit compared to our adjusted rate plan. And then from there, we were able to hit 100%. But that pushback came in the form of some pretty severe negative reputation campaigns where people were posting in any platform that they could, sending text message campaigns to people just to make sure everyone knew that these rate increases were happening. So
I got something that people send me stuff all the time, but I probably should show this, but I blacked out all the important stuff. So this was in a major tier 1 market. I won't say which one. And this was on what the person thought was a leasing office. It's a long story. I won't get into it, but there is an all-out campaign in a couple of these markets for folks to halt rent increases. So I've been wondering how long it's going to be before we start hearing people really push back.
So we actually go ahead, TJ.
I would say on the other end of the spectrum, I wanted to point out that if your brand is super strong and you are one of the market leaders, we have seen that ceiling is not as strong, and the availability to go in and really kind of outperform the market does exist. For example, in my Texas Tech market, we limped in to 95%, sacrificed some GPR year one of the lease up. We are 48 points ahead from a leasing perspective last year, and are $200 north on average per bed of where the rates were last year. So, if you do have the right staff, if you do have the right brand, and you are able to sustain in some of these markets and keep that focus on the lifestyle and that kind of stuff, I think you can get away from some of this. But again, this is very common too.
Yeah. And just to kind of echo off that, TJ, like we've had, this similar 4 years ago, we had this at Aspire College Station where rents were just changing every single day and we could not keep up with the velocity. I think after that happened there, nationwide for us at TDC, we just set the expectation. I think we have to go in as owners and operators and let our kids know, hey, listen, today's the rate, tomorrow it can change. Like if we get 50 people through the door, and I think that's something that with our strategies, it's hard to forecast that, like, oh, this is what our rent growths are going to be this year, because if people are signing 50 leases in a week, we can't have that. Like we need 25 leases a week so that we can slowly hit our tiers instead of jumping $200 in a week. And so I think that's one thing that we've really learned at TDC is just we have to set the expectation upon move-in, letting kids know, like, you may only have a day to renew. And if you want your spot for next year and you want the lowest rate of the year, this is kind of what you have to do. You don't get time to think on it like before.
And to echo your point, right, that makes move-in, turn, some of your facilitated events throughout the year when you walk units at Christmas and spring break and that kind of stuff, you're going to have to be effective in those times because they're going to have a direct effect on your brand, the lifestyle, and again, your perception within that market.
100%.
Hey, I wanted to talk a little bit about new developments versus stabilized, because all of you guys are working with new development, or at least with companies that have new developments this year. And, there used to be a time, TJ, when you and I were starting in this business that, it was always the newest thing that was going to lease up.
Yep.
And
roll a trailer out and the line started, right? And everybody just kind of came to you.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't see that as much anymore. I think it probably has to do more with PTSD of a lot of stuff being delivered late. By the way, for those in the audience, I have put out a poll on rates I'd really like to get you guys to respond to, and I'll publish it here in a second. But I wanted to talk to you guys and see, basically on specific projects that your companies are working with, is that holding out what we're seeing this year? And on this graph where we're seeing, only the Southwest is kind of keeping up with the stabilized properties, but is this what you're experiencing with the properties that your companies are delivering?
100% for us. My one new development in South Carolina, the market is, touching 90% right now. Meanwhile, the two new developments, we're sitting around 60%. It is a tough market. And I think one of the things that really attributes to that is, I think, if anyone's trigger shy right now, it's guarantors. Guarantors need full conviction to countersign those leases, and kids won't even sign on their lease anymore until mom and dad truly sign off and say it's approved. And I think post-COVID, they've really stuck their heels in to say, like, if you have to show it to me before my kid's moving in there. And so I think that has really played integral in our lease up this year, is like, it's just slowed us down. And so we're even looking at underwriting models, and like, we may start projecting differently, because I think this is something that is probably, I've seen it for the past 3 years now, that new developments continuously become harder and harder to lease up. And so we're looking at strategies for the future for new deals, because maybe we need to underwrite 80% year one, and the following year shoot for a higher GPR increase, to TJ's point, knowing that we can get those increase in rents the following year once it's actually built.
I'll touch on that. So talking with a lot of the developments, the clients we work with, I think, as again, maybe pre-existing me entering the space, but you had the new dev, it would lease up just because it was the new shiny thing in town. I think, as Wes, you alluded to, the sentiment of like, is this going to deliver? Are there going to be challenges? Is, from a parent's perspective, is little Sally actually going to get a room or not? Right. Has become kind of the mainstay. And, as we're talking about underwriting and looking at that timeline, like a lot of the clients, people that I'm talking to, whether they're LP or, the actual developer, they're taking a 2-year lens, right? If year one, we get above 75 to 80%, like that's a win. Yeah. And right, the clock really starts in year 2, right? It's the fancy, shiny thing in the market. You can understand the lifestyle, as TJ mentioned as well, and see that brand where, students can actually experience the asset, right? Check out the brand new amenities that may be different than something 3 years ago. So This chart here we put together is just showing that, like, year two, again, this is 22 versus the current ones, but I mean, just in the Midwest there, you can see almost a 20% increase there, whether that's a renewal base, who's to say, but still you're getting, you're ahead on pre-leasing. And then also, you have pretty substantial rent growth, especially like in the West and the Southeast. You're almost at 11.9%. So that year two lens is, as TJ mentioned, sacrificing GPR in year one and kind of rolling the dice a little bit with a 2-year outlook. Based on the people that I'm talking to, has been kind of what a status quo, and especially when talking with the lender, when talking with, the different pieces of the puzzle that's pulling together the development deal.
Yeah, on our poll, everybody that's voting that's got a new development, 25% are saying that the new development is actually leasing up faster, and 75% with the stabilized assets.
Wes, it's interesting. Obviously some of this is going to be regionally specific. And I think when it comes to stabilization of certain markets, right, you have to look at what the stabilized assets in the market have done and how they performed and manage, as well as the new developments. I think you look at some markets like Austin, where you've seen some really big misses and some really big messes in terms of facilitating students in and out of hotels. And, no one wants to move more than once, right? That's why we all try to keep that back door closed and renew as many kids as possible from a stabilized standpoint, right? If you are going to move, I think making the move easier and makes it that much of an easier chance to make a decision. But to John's point, these parents have come roaring back involved. When I first got out here, we used to literally roll a trailer out in front of the development, right? And it didn't even have a bathroom in it. We didn't do commercial spaces or anything like that, right? And the kids just kind of lined up. I think that, with some of that PTSD, especially in some of these markets where you've seen, just some messes, to be frank, you have a much more educated buyer on both the parent side and the student side. And to Charlie's and those guys' points, you really have to kind of prove it up. That takes time. COVID and supply chain issues have cut into that. And I think you're seeing people start earlier and earlier to kind of roll out that kind of standard foundation, so the kids understand kind of what you're bringing, what that lifestyle is supposed to be. Because if you don't, it's going to take longer to adhere to it.
Well, hey, I want to move over to talk a little bit about the floor plans, because, and I just posted a poll about tier 2 and tier 3 as well, if folks could respond to that. But Charlie, you and I all season long have talked about these, unicorn 6-bedroom units that there's so few of them. Anytime we've tried asking a panelist about it,
well, it's the same question. I think, as we look at again, we're later in the leasing cycle, a little tougher to get, 6 people wrapped up together if they're, not from a roommate matching piece. So we've definitely seen a little bit of, velocity slow down on the 6s, but still, you're seeing, tremendous growth there from a year-over-year perspective. Again, there may be a little dip in velocity, but I think that the general thing that we've uncovered here is that they're one of the lowest renewal percentages. So a lot of those new market rates are put out there. But honestly, we're still seeing people be aggressive with rents. Very few kind of dipping down a little bit, may have gotten a little bit too aggressive, and the leasing has halted, like I know we discussed here in our pre-call. But from an aggregate, we've touched 12.5% year over year. I think 8.9 was the lowest. So you're still somewhere in that double-digit range year over year. And the one thing is, and I always get asked, like, what do we see next year? You mentioned that for occupancy. I think as operators and asset managers alike understand or take the learnings from this year and be a little bit more, I guess, I would say dynamic, but for lack of a better word, like, better understand, hey, the renewal, we're happy to put this back on the open market because we know that we can get market rent at X% higher. So, I still have a positive outlook. And I think on the CBRE national call, the general thing was somewhere between the 3 and 8%. I don't know if we're going to see 20% again, like in some of these markets, like a Knoxville and a West Lafayette. But the outlook is still strong fundamentally. We've seen floor plans at least up in 2 days that were at $1,100 for a 2-bedroom. Now that same market rent's $1,400, right? Yeah. At a minimum, meet in the middle there. So, from a rate growth perspective and just understanding where, that's coming from. You're seeing it across all types, and the larger unit types, again, smaller from a concentration perspective or number of beds.
So let's Let's talk about that larger 6-bedroom, because we've got one of those unicorns on the panel today with John. And
I've got a 6-bedroom too. I'll help you out.
I want you to tell us a little bit about what's going on in Tucson, because I don't understand why someone is willing to pay more money to have 5 roommates versus 1 roommate.
If I could do a whole property of 6 bedrooms out in Tucson, I would do it, because I mean, so really, and we kind of talked about this earlier, but it's really, I attribute that entirely to the Greek village, or the Greek life on at U of A, and because it's such a Greek centric university. Literally, I mean, we rolled out 6 bedrooms on September 1, and they were sold out by October 15th. And that's really just because they were like one-off ones, but like, I mean, they were 90% filled within 30 days of leasing. And it's because you're getting this group that is coming in and is taking the entire floor plan offline. Okay. And what we're seeing, and we're seeing that nationwide too. I know any university that we have a strong Greek presence, if we have 6 bedrooms there, they're instantly gone, because again, I can live with everyone from move out of the house and we move right in there with my buddies or my sorority sisters.
Right. We're seeing the same thing. It's people are taking down whole 6 bedrooms and whole 5-bedroom units for the most part, right? It's not kind of a mix and match type thing. So, and I think it's, like John said, it's a little bit market dependent. It's also about the education of the market, right? If you're kind of the first one through the wall and you're bringing a new style of living to a market, it takes a little bit longer for that to hold. But if you can demonstrate properly to the market that it's a viable living situation, that can be pretty popular with your Greeks and your younger students.
Yeah. Megan, I wanted to ask you one question really quick, because I wanted to spend more time on this, but we can't. We got to move on to our next segment. But I am interested in hearing from you. How is this leasing season impacting what you're looking for from a budget perspective going into this next fiscal cycle? Or I've got managers calling me saying that they just, their asset managers just slashed their marketing budget by 50%. So
Yeah.
Is that what are those the type of talks you guys are having?
I think the marketing budget is typically always looked at as like the first place to cut things, the first place that things go. So on top of that normal kind of climate, we're seeing that one of the parts that's hard to plan for is this year we leased up significantly early compared to when we had planned to for income and for what we plan to spend in our budget for marketing. So we're trying to kind of play with where we think we'll land next year and kind of where to plan those things going forward. But on top of that, we are trying to do what we can to pull back on some of the marketing events or marketing efforts that maybe just aren't so fruitful now that we're in such a digital age. But to counter that, I know I've also heard people discuss that they're pulling, digital ad money altogether or cutting it pretty slim and going a different route. So I think all of the years post-COVID have kind of thrown like a different atmosphere at us year over year. And so the struggle this year is trying to, again, predict what exactly we can cut and where we're going to land to plan to spend around it.
Gotcha. Great. Well, guys, thanks so much for spending time today. And I hate I spent the first 3 minutes of this thing on mute and have taken that time away from you guys. But I do want to make sure we get to our mental health segment because I know that's a really important segment that folks are tuning in for. But thanks so much. And also, while we're making this transition of going between panels, I just want to tell everybody Happy Mother's Day. That's a mother out there. And that's not just for myself, but also from NMHC and College House as well. Charlie, have you got your mom a gift yet?
My mother jetted off to the Bahamas, so she's not even going to hang out.
She got herself a gift.
Yeah,
it's probably because I signed a lease in college without her permission and signed her name as my guarantor. So don't do that.
I just launched that poll as well as far as who's purchased their mother a gift so far. Well, guys, thanks so much. I've got Richie coming on now.
Thank you, guys.
And,
bye, y'all.
Thanks.
Hey, I want one of those T-shirts. Let Richie know. Charlie got one. His fault. Thanks, guys.
Oh yeah.
Thanks. All right, guys. As I'm switching everybody over and bringing up the new panel, give me just a second. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
How we doing?
Doing well, doing well. Thanks so much for you guys sitting through everything up to this point. I wanted to get to this about 10 minutes ago, but let's jump right into it. May's Mental Health Awareness Month, and we've had within this industry especially over the past year, but even over the past 2 or 3 years, especially with this pandemic, we've had a lot of discussions about, our residents' mental wellness and, how we can best, support them. And there's a partnership that started back in 2019 with the Hi How Are You Foundation based in Austin, Texas, that Tom is a co-founder of, and I'll introduce him here in just a second. They partnered with ACC on doing some things kind of local within Austin. And in 2021, that turned into a survey that they launched through all the ACC properties to really try to get some information back from their residents to find out, how they could best support their residents and ways to modify training with their staff to better support the students. And then last year that turned into the college student mental wellness coalition that has now expanded to another 23 national firms. I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about it, and I'm sure many of your firms are actually a part of it. And that ended up launching, I think Richie, tell me if I'm right or not, I believe it was 880,000, something like that. Emails that went out to get the survey out to everybody across the country. And we got some really great information back on that. And we want to talk a little bit about that, but I want you guys to introduce yourself, and Tom, we'll start with you. And if you kind of give us a little overview of what your foundation has been doing and kind of the setup with ACC as well, that would be great.
Yeah. So Hi How Are You Project is a mental health awareness nonprofit organization. We focus on young people ages 14 to 24. We're 6 years old. We started in Austin, Texas, really just as a one-time concert event to raise mental health awareness and encourage people in the city to have these Hi How Are You conversations. And the response to that concert was so great that we really recognized that we need to commit to this and do it full time. And, it was a year or so later that we had a really wonderful and fortunate meeting with Gina Cowart from ACC. ACC had purchased the building, the property in Austin that is the home to the Hi How Are You mural. And so Gina was asking about the mural, and that, led to the conversation about mental health awareness. And we were both aligned that it was very important. And so we've been working with ACC for a little over 5 years on staff training programs and on-site events, and particularly around Hi How Are You Day, which for us is January 22nd. And then May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And right now we're engaged in a Happy Habitathon, encouraging residents and staff to have healthy habits that support their mental well-being. And then World Mental Health Day on October 10th. Those are our kind of 3 tentpole events. And it's been incredible that ACC has really given us this audience and this partnership. It's been incredible.
Fantastic. Richie, you want to talk a little bit, obviously introduce yourself, and then talk a little bit about what the coalition's done this year.
Yeah, definitely. Hi, everyone. I'm Richie Lasik from Core Spaces, Director of Innovation and Engagement, and been involved here at Core with our mental health initiatives. And as Wes and Tom here alluded to, in 2021, that's really when conversations started between some of the student housing companies, including ACC. And really the question was, how can we come together and share best practices to help our students' mental health, right? To help our residents' mental health. What can we do better? And, just from getting to know what ACC is doing better and Hi How Are You Project is doing better, they've really been a leader in the space to help orient the coalition on what is the best way to implement the best programming to help our students' mental health. So it's been awesome getting to know Tom here better and his organization. And, now we're at 24 companies in this coalition. And over the past year, since we started talking last in December 2021, over the past year, we now have a reach of over 800,000 students in 216 university markets. So what Tom and ACC started, in Austin five years ago, now we have the opportunity to reach over 800,000 students in 216 markets, which is really exciting. And again, that is just the first year, as we are still accepting members in the coalition, which I'll talk about later. But we've also had an opportunity to start thinking, okay, we have all these members in the coalition. Where do we start, right? And the root of innovation is curiosity, right? And so what we did was, let's go and get some data to see where our students are at. Instead of starting to implement programming throughout all of our portfolios, let's go see where our students are at. So we released our first Thriving College Student Index this past fall to over 800,000 students. Happy to say we had over 18,000 students across our portfolios answer to give us a nice data set to really orient what is that next step. And that has led us to, how do we help our team members? And then how do we then help our students? And so thinking of great people in the space, in addition to, hi, how are you? We started talking to Jed Foundation. And so I know Nancy's here on the call, and she'll introduce Jed and what we're doing, but really excited about where we're going for year 2. And I'll talk more later on in this segment about what's to come. But I guess one last best practice from ACC here at Core Spaces this week for Mental Health Awareness Month is all about healthy habits. And that's just an example of knowing Tom, knowing Gene at ACC, knowing what they're doing to help their team members' mental health. We took our subcommittee and said, okay, how can we, share a best practice that's working for ACC? And Tom, I feel like an awesome best practice is what you all are doing with the mural in Austin, if you want to talk about that really quickly.
Yeah, the mural, which was the inspiration for the Hi, How Are You project, ACC is doing a, complete rebuild of that property. And the whole city was very concerned that as the building's being knocked down, is the mural going to be preserved? And ACC has gone through additional time and expense and great care to preserve the mural. And it kind of led to this massive press opportunity that we received in the market. And, every major news network and newspaper was covering this story, which was really timely because it led into Mental Health Awareness Month and the opportunity to use this media, not just to talk about ACC's efforts to preserve the mural, but also what people could do for their own mental well-being during the month of May. So it was a really timely opportunity, and we're of course very grateful for what ACC is doing to take care to preserve that mural. It's really special.
Great. Dr. Roy, we'll go to you next.
Hi, I'm Nancy Roy. I am the Chief Clinical Officer at the Jed Foundation. For those of you who are not familiar with Jed, we are a nonprofit whose mission is to promote mental health and reduce suicide among teens and young adults. So we we're in about maybe a little over 480 or so colleges and universities across the country, working with them on their policies, programs, and systems that promote mental health to reduce suicide and substance misuse. And so in thinking about this work that you are all doing and thinking about partnering together to expand the work that we do on campus and how much of that can be transferred to the off-campus housing market, where so many of our students are also living. And so we're beginning to have some conversations about what that might look like, how we can develop in your buildings, in your residences, those cultures of caring and compassion and sense of belonging, among other things, that we are also doing with our campus partners, and bridging, if you will, the types of resources and culture that we're able to do on campus with the off-campus housing market.
Yeah. Jed has been, I first came across Jed probably 5 or 6 years ago. And it was actually kind of because of this podcast and some of the content that we were creating that led me to Jed. And you guys are certainly the kind of the largest out there providing these types of services to the universities. And you guys, I believe you guys were founded in 2000.
Yeah, so we were founded in 2000 by a couple, Donna and Phil Satow, whose son Jed died by suicide when he was in college, hence the name of our organization. And initially, focused very, very specifically on suicide prevention. And soon realized, I would say, that if you really want to move the needle on suicide prevention, we need to be much more upstream and talking about promoting positive mental health. And so much of our work, and for anyone who's interested to go to our website, you will see our comprehensive approach where we work with schools on helping develop life skills for students, increasing help seeking and stigma reduction, developing senses of connection and belonging, helping to identify students when they're just beginning to struggle, not waiting for them to be in crisis or significant distress, looking at services that are offered, campaigns that you can offer for stigma reduction and help seeking, looking at the safety of your buildings. So for campus, for example, where are there places on campus where a student might be able to bring harm to themselves? And the residence halls being one of those places, and also looking, for example, in off-campus housing, doing an environmental scan. Yeah. So there's many components to our approach that we look at when we're working with schools. And I do believe, honestly, that probably all of those categories or buckets, is we call them, would be applicable and helpful in developing the kinds of communities that I also just heard in listening to the folks that preceded us, what parents and students and parents are becoming, it sounds like, much more savvy and interested in what exactly is the residential experience going to be in this off-campus housing building. And so we certainly know that they're asking those questions on campus. And what are you doing, especially around mental health and support? And so my suspicion is that you will likely be getting a lot more of those targeted questions as well in your buildings on how are you building communities that are supportive and healthy.
So with you guys starting in 2000, that kind of means you guys have seen 3 generations now, the Gen Xers, the millennials, and now Gen Z. Just want to ask, what has, obviously, the approach that you guys were talking about, or that you were talking about, I'm sure has evolved. But as far as the students, how, what are some of the key differences that you've noticed or trends that you've seen at servicing across those generations?
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk and a lot of stuff in the media about, the mental health crisis that our youth are experiencing. And we like to shy away from the term crisis because it doesn't particularly seem to be helpful in terms of solutions or strategies, and tends to incite more, I think, fear. It's not to say that we're not seeing many students who are struggling, but we have been seeing these students, to your point, over the past 10, 15 years struggling. Certainly the pandemic exacerbated especially senses of isolation and lack of belonging and loneliness. Much like, we've heard the Surgeon General be talking, thank goodness, and bringing attention to the loneliness epidemic in our country. We've been seeing this for years. Did the pandemic cause a spike? Yeah, but it's not like all of a sudden we've had an explosion in our young people of mental health issues. Anxiety and depression have been on the rise over time. I will say that right now, I think our young people are dealing with a very scary and uncertain world, which also factors into the impact on their mental health. I mean, they're growing up with school shootings. They're growing up with hate crimes, racial divisiveness, climate change, the pandemic. I mean, this is not a particularly safe world that our young people are growing up in.
Yeah.
So, I think we'd be more surprised if they weren't anxious and a little depressed.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, talking about trends a little bit, Richie, you've got some data points from the most recent survey that I was wanting to see if you could kind of walk us through here.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Wes. And what I'll do here is I'll also send a link in the chat towards the end of the call that anyone can access the full report. But just wanted to highlight, and going off what Nancy was saying and Tom, and just what they're seeing. This is what our students said, right? So when you think of the 18,000 students across the 216 markets that responded across our portfolios, you see here students that said, hey, my mental health is very good or somewhat good, were almost just as likely to say my mental health is somewhat poor or poor, right? So when, I guess, a takeaway going away, to your communities, thinking of events and thinking of programming, thinking of intentionality, and thinking of the words belonging and connectedness, how can you get students to feel more on that 40% of somewhat good and good, as opposed to somewhat poor or very poor, right? And what can you do as a community manager to create that sense of belonging and that connectedness? And so, Wes, if you don't mind going to the next slide here, another thing that we asked our students about is just what emotions are you feeling? And as you can see here in the blue bar, on a total spectrum, it's more on the negative, the more on the negative side. But if you're a thriving student, you can see here that there's more positive emotions that are coming up. And so the way we actually dissected the survey is people self-described how their mental health was right now and how they think it will be in the future. And so we broke up the data between a thriving student, a maintaining student, and a struggling student. As you can see here, our thriving students are the ones that were more likely to say, hey, I've been experiencing positive emotions. So I'll get to this later in our talk here of how we can empower those thriving students. And then finally, we took a pulse on, okay, how are our students taking care of their mental health? Without us coming in and providing that programming, how can we meet them where they're at? And so what we see here is overwhelmingly people are saying, hey, I'm listening to music to take care of my mental health. I'm also socializing. I'm watching TVs and movies. I'm spending time outside. So for all you operators on this call, when you think of your programming, how can you align your events to mirror what our students are doing to take care of themselves? And then for all of you developers and architects on the call, how can we design our communities of the future, again, to mirror this data? And I mean, Tom, I hope this is just, music to your ears, no pun intended here, seeing what students said in the survey when it thinks, hi, how are you?
Yeah, I mean, our focus is very much around community, people being together with one another. So promoting events and programming that bring people together, and music is such a great one. When you're at a concert, when you're together with other people enjoying music, that's a very uplifting experience. So it's good to see that some of our original instincts are kind of being supported with the data. But to echo Richie's point, whatever you can do on site to promote community, is really everything.
And so I wanted to, I think one of the biggest questions that, site level managers and regional managers within our industry that are in those day-to-day contacts with students, I think this is probably the biggest question they have. And I think you are certainly qualified to help answer this. But as a student housing manager, how can those managers identify student who may be struggling, and when and how do they refer them to professional help?
So I think, first of all, great idea that every student housing manager gets some training on what to look for and how to respond. One of the things that we really emphasize at JED is this isn't rocket science, right? You don't need to be a licensed clinician to be able to offer a warm hand, keep your eyes open, and have a conversation with a student. right? So unfortunately, I think a lot of the trainings that people have had have focused a lot on crisis and can be fairly intimidating for non-clinical people. So, I mean, we're talking about basic things. Like if you notice that a student has, is spending an inordinate amount of time in their room, or they're not out socializing with friends, or they don't come out to the common area, or if you have, I don't know if you have dining facilities in your buildings, if they're not coming out for food, they're not coming to any social events. You see them in their appearances, disheveled, or their hygiene is poor. They look like they haven't slept in 3 days. I mean, things that you would notice in your friends, in your colleagues, in your coworkers, your co-office mates. I mean, we're talking about simple day-to-day signs that we all see in each other. Looks like somebody's maybe just having an off day, not waiting until someone is breaking down in your office in distress and crisis to see what's going on. But when you see that first sign of struggle, in whatever way that might be, given your role in the organization, to reach out and say, hey, I notice you usually come to a lot of social events and I haven't seen you at anything in a couple of days. Or, gee, I haven't seen you around in the hall. It seems like you've been spending more time in your room. What's going on? How might I help? Certainly, if they reveal an acute issue, something very serious or significant, you definitely want to be able to know where to refer them for support on campus or off, depending on your relationship with the university, and be able to make that connection, not just say, oh, you should go talk to Jane Smith at the counseling center, on your campus, but to actually facilitate that connection. So maybe make that call with the student, or get them the number. But we really want to focus on the human connection and that warm outreach from someone who is organically in their world, and not just because you see someone that looks like they might be having a bad day, immediately refer them to counseling or professional help. Because not all students need psychotherapy, but they all can benefit from a warm hand and outreach from someone in their world.
Gotcha. No, that's great advice, and taking that, I can't wait. Until you guys are further along in this partnership to see tactically what that will end up becoming at each campus. I think that's fantastic. Well, let's Richie and Tom, I guess I can go to you guys next and talk a little bit about what kind of problems and challenges, because you guys are the ones that are dealing on the off-campus housing side. What kind of problems and challenges, do you guys see? And I think there's part of that report, Richie, on this next slide that you wanted me to share. By the way, Richie, I did the full, I think, was it 50 pages? I've also put that out for files that somebody can, for our audience members to be able to download. So that's out there now as well. And like I said earlier, we'll link it on the website as well. But yeah, what kind of problems are we specifically dealing with in student housing when it comes to this?
Yeah, well, Wes, appreciate you for sending that link out. Thank you. And just to summarize what everyone's looking at right here, long story short is that if your residents feel like they have a sense of belonging in your community and they feel connected, they have a relationship with you, they're more likely to have a positive outlook on their mental health. So again, coming away from this conversation today, how might we bring those students that maybe don't feel like they have connection at a community feeling like they do, and they feel very connected? How can we make our programming more intentional with more purpose? And we're hoping that this data will be motivation and help educate our team members that, hey, there's a lot of opportunity to do a lot of good in our communities. But in regards to trends, right? I mean, this was our first survey in this past year. So as we look to do an annual index, which we will be doing this fall, hopefully with new coalition members, and then into the future every year, Wes, and future podcast appearances on Mental Health Awareness Month, we'll be more confident on speaking what exactly those problems or challenges are. But I think this is an awesome guidepost, a nice beacon for community managers to understand how they can help their students' mental health.
Great. Tom, do you have anything else to add to that?
Just to echo on what Dr. Roy said so well. I mean, it's what's happening on college campuses is what's happening everywhere, and the things that people see in the news. Social media is not being social. It is a disconnected technology. People need to be together physically. That's why, whatever you can do on the resident side to promote spaces where people can come together. I think that's one of the biggest challenges we're seeing is just, young people growing up in a social media world where they care about, how many likes or comments they're getting on a post rather than really tangible and real connection with another person, whether that's a friend or a resident advisor or a professor or a counselor, whoever it might be. That human connection is so much more important and healthy for us than the technology connections.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about this partnership that you guys are currently working on. Richie, I'll start with you, but I guess everybody could kind of chime in. What are you guys looking to achieve through this partnership?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll give everyone the kind of a vision statement, and I'll let Dr. Roy and Tom kind of fill in from there. But when we first came together as a coalition and started to talk, how do we get a parent who has a college student living on campus, knowing that they're going to be moving to off campus next year? How do we get that parent to feel just as good about the support and care that their college kid has as a freshman or sophomore living on campus as they do later on in their college years? How do we get to that point? And so working with Tom's organization, Dr. Roy's organization, we feel like we have starting to fit those puzzle pieces to get to that vision point.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think, I'll probably repeat what I said a few minutes ago, but really thinking about how we can translate what we are doing for those students that have been living on campus that are then going to transition to off campus. How can that thread continue in the off campus housing situation? And thinking about how we can implement our comprehensive approach in the ways that fit in the off campus housing world, many of which I think do fit. And so thinking collaboratively on how we would actualize that and implement that in the off-campus housing space. And in case I forget, because I have a tendency to do that, I want to make sure that folks know to go to the JED Foundation website. I don't know if you're going to post that, Wes, or not, but it's just jedfoundation.org. We have many, many, many free resources on our website that you can take right now and use in your buildings. Our Seize the Awkward campaign with the Ad Council is one that has been tremendously successful. Also in activating behavioral change among young people and reaching out to one another when they see someone that they think might be struggling a bit. And many other resources that you can just take for free and start using right now. So I encourage you to take a look.
Yeah, it's a fantastic website, and I would encourage everybody to make sure you're on the university part of it, not necessarily the high school part of it, because JED does provides a lot of resources for high school as well. And but yeah, I've scoured over the website and downloaded a lot of different things and looked at a lot of different videos that you guys have, and it's a fantastic resource. So I think I guess the next question I wanted to really kind of ask all of you, how our audience can get more involved. I think you kind of hit on that just then, but when it comes to Hi, How Are You and the coalition, Richie, I put out a poll just a second ago, asking how many people were part of the survey, and 16% were not. So we've definitely got some audience members, and of course there will be more audience members when this goes out to the podcast and on YouTube. What ways can they get involved with joining the coalition if they're not already?
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate that, Wes. So for all of you on the call that are not part of the coalition, Wes, like you said, we'll be sharing that link. It's a quick 8-question prompt, and this is actually for both operators and non-operators. So if you're a vendor, if you're an investor, if you're a developer, architect on the call, we are starting to talk to non-operators as well, how you can get involved in the coalition. So we're looking at around like a June 1st deadline for student housing operators to join for this year. And so basically we want to make sure that we get everyone signed up, because you'll be part of the survey effort for this fall. Our goal is to reach 1 million college students. So like I said, last year, we were able to get to over 800,000 college students with the 24 companies that have been in the coalition. Our goal is to get that reach up to 1 million. So Wes will be sending that link. And then I want to give a quick shout out to our leadership group of the coalition, just to give you kind of a scope of who's been leading the way here with the coalition. And so I want to say thank you to Teresa Zapata at RPM Living, Casey Peterson at Peak, Jonathan Bovey at Landmark, Dan Ohlsdorf at Campus Advantage, Gina Coward at ACC, Jen at Cardinal, Helen at Campus, and then myself at Core. We make up the 8 leaders of the coalition. Jonathan Bovey from Landmark will actually be working with any potential new interested members of the coalition. So I can include his email in the chat here as well, but sign up for that link. Jonathan will be reaching out to you, and we hope to have you part of our efforts this fall.
Fantastic. Yeah, that link is out. If you click on it, it'll pop up another page in your browser, and you'll be able to fill out that form. Tom, I know we've got a lot of audience members here that are in the Austin area. You mentioned a couple of things earlier. Anything still going on this month or this summer that you want to talk about at all?
Yeah, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. We're engaged right now in our Happy Habitathon. If you go to hihowareyou.org, there's still time to register. We have materials in English, Spanish, and French. Really encouraging those healthy habits and doing them together with others. So, you can access those free resources. Dr. Sonia Krishna, who is on our board and contributes a lot to the program that we do, sends her regret. She wanted to be on this call, but wasn't able to be here today. But you can find a lot of the resources at hihowareyou.org. And yeah, May is still going on, and then our next tentpole event will be around World Mental Health Day on October 10th.
Gotcha. So we've gone 15 minutes over. I appreciate you guys being so gracious with your time. Richie, I know you've got a couple other slides that I think it's very important that we go through for this audience, as I think it's probably one of the main reasons that this is kind of the main information that they wanted to get. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of these recommendations and some of the things that they should be looking to plan, going into this next year?
Absolutely. And, a lot of what Dr. Roy was talking about, and Tom, with connectedness, belonging, being together, community, right? You look at the word map right here that popped up as a result from a survey. It aligns exactly with what our students want, right? So as you look, we also have top 3 recommendations here that, come away from this survey for each of you community managers out there. When you think of your operations team, how can we promote more socialization, again, outdoor events, events with music, right? And then how are we removing the stigma at our communities? And how can you incorporate this messaging in your marketing, your communication to your residents? And then again, when you think of the thriving, maintaining, struggling students, how do we get the struggling students up to what thriving students feel, right? And so when you think of your residents that you know so well, your thriving students you're probably thinking of right now, how can you do more discovery with them, have more fruitful conversations with them? Because I'm sure they have awesome ideas of how to make your programming more intentional.
Great. And I do have this other poll question out there that came in from somebody that I sent the report to earlier in preparation for this. And the one question she had, This is a site manager that's at a Midwest university. Prior to the pandemic, we had great involvement from students attending our social events. We brought those events back this past fall, and even though our occupancy is higher than in 2019, we have struggled all year to get residents to participate or other managers experiencing the same. So that pool is out there, and it looks to be right around 50-50 right now of yes, attendance just isn't the same, or no, we're partying like it's 2019. So anyway, you've got one more slide here I know you want to go over.
Oh, this was kind of just a summary of what I already discussed with recommendations on what type of events, empowering your thriving students.
Fantastic. Well, I wish we could get to Q&A for everybody. If you've got a question, please put it up there. I will definitely forward it to Dr. Roy and the coalition leaders if there's anything that specific that you want to make sure that that you get answered, here this month. Let's certainly go ahead and put that in the Q&A, and I'll make sure that they get that. Again, thanks so much, Richie and Nance and Tom for taking time out of your day to do this. Sorry we went over. It's all my fault. So I appreciate that. I hope you won't hold that against me the next time we cover this, but I appreciate it so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for this.
Thanks.
This was awesome.
Take care.
Thanks. Well, guys, that does it for this Shop Talk. Again, thank you for the extended time that we've gone over. Additionally, we will have a replay that will be out here within the next 24 to 48 hours. You should get an email on that with a link. That will be edited, so you won't have to listen to all the blank noise while I was muted. And we are also going to take that interview with the mental health panel and put that out on our podcast, and that'll happen just here in the next week or so. So make sure that you're sharing that with everybody. Again, share this with your colleagues. I appreciate it so much. If you want more information, please go to shoptalk.info, and we'll see you next month on Tuesday, June 13th. Thanks.